Okay, so we have 2 out of 4 down. The next two properties are transition delay and transition timing function. So we're going to start off with delay. It's pretty simple. All that it does is it allows us to specify how long of a pause there should be before the transition actually begins. And there are 2 versions we can use. We can pass in a single time, like 4 seconds, and this would say, okay, this transition, wait 4 seconds until it begins. As soon as it's triggered, pause for 4 seconds. Horrible experience for the most part as a user, but you can work with milliseconds. Sometimes you're using delays if you want 2 transitions to happen, but you want one to happen immediately, and then another one when that one completes or when that finishes. And the way you could do that is with this second version down here, where you pass in comma-separated values. So just like we did with transition property, where we had color and opacity, and then 2 different times or durations that correspond to the properties, you can do the same thing with transition delay. So this one would apply to whatever the first property we're transitioning is, and this would apply to the second, and so on if we have more than 2. So let's go to CodePen and play around. All right, so we have these 2 boring and animated boxes, and right now there's no delay on animated. So it's as simple as saying transition delay, and let's do something like 2 seconds to make it really clear. So this is unchanged, of course, but this one that has the animated class, I hover, and then the transition kicks in 2 seconds later. Now remember, we're not transitioning the scale that's happening here, so it does immediately double in size, but the transition doesn't kick in for 2 seconds, which is for border radius and then also for background color. And then if we wanted to, we could do something like this. Transition delay will be 1 second for our background, comma, let's do 0.5 milliseconds for border radius. So let me actually make this even clearer. Let's do 2 seconds. So what this is saying is that, okay, the background transition should take 5 seconds, but don't start it until 2 seconds after it's been triggered. And the border radius should take 1 second to complete, but wait half a second. 0.5 milliseconds isn't going to get us very far. We won't notice that. That's insanely fast. I meant to do 0.5 seconds. So let's try that again. So you can see it waits half a second, then the border radius kicks in, but the background transition doesn't kick in for a while. And let me speed this up so that background takes 1 second and border radius take 1 second so that it's a little clearer. And let's say the transition delay is 5 seconds for background and 2 seconds for border radius. So now there should be a 2 second pause before it turns into a circle. And then as that finishes, there should be a short pause, and then the rest of the background should transition. All right, so that's all there is to using transition delay. As you can see, the order does matter if we're going to assign multiple transitions that have differing values. Okay, so that brings us to our next and final property here, for transitions at least, which is the transition timing function. So I did save this one for last on purpose, not because it's particularly tough or challenging to get. It's just harder to notice the changes that it makes sometimes. Essentially what it controls is the acceleration of our animation. So we could have 10 different animations that take 10 seconds. Let's say we're animating background color. We could have 10 different things that are the exact same colors from red to purple, let's say, over 10 seconds. But in those 10 seconds, there's so many different ways that the animation could proceed. It could start off really quickly and then slow down for the last second. Or it could take 10 seconds and basically go at the same speed the entire time. And there are more complex curves that we can define that you can see down here as well, where we can actually specify different values along a curve for it to follow. So this can be a little bit difficult to wrap your head around. There's this pretty cool easing functions cheat sheet that I found at easings.net. And what this does is it shows you some really common shapes or curves that you can use for your easing functions. So here's an example. If you hover over one of them, ease in sign, notice that little red, let me zoom in a bit, the red flag on the right side. That's the thing that's being transitioned or animated, and watch it doesn't go at a constant speed. It starts off slow and then it speeds up a bit towards the end. Or if we go to a more drastic one, how about ease, let's do ease out and back, this one. So what this does, if I can get it to trigger, there we go, is it basically goes pretty quickly at the beginning and slows down, and it goes a little bit too far actually, and then comes back to our endpoint. So watch that again. And let's see, let's do one more. How about ease in, out, circ? So what's happening here, it starts slow, and then it speeds up, and then it ends slow. I don't know if you can pick that up on the video. One thing of note, this section down here is actually reserved for things that you can't do with just CSS. So things with these more complex curves, like these bounces, these are actually accomplished with JavaScript plus CSS. Or you can do them when we talk about keyframes in just the next section coming up. But with transitions on their own, you're limited to these types of curves. Okay, so it's kind of hard when we just talk about it without actually seeing an example. I like the examples on the transition timing function page on MDN. So I'll scroll down and you can see if it loads. Under examples, there are, let's see, 8 different red squares that are all identical, but they have different timing functions, but they're doing the same thing. So they go from a red square to a smaller blue square that's also moving. It's being transformed or translated across the page. But notice that even though they start at the same place, they end at the same place, they take a very different journey to get there. The acceleration is different. So these are transition timing functions that are controlling that. And they're really important towards making your animations feel natural, making them feel sort of like they're alive sometimes. So let's play around. We're not going to do anything crazy. But let's go to our transition playground, and I'm actually going to undo, well, I'll just comment it out for now, all of this code. And what we're going to do instead is say the animated box, or let's do all boxes when they hover, or when we hover. We'll do a translate X. Let's do 300 pixels. So we'll have it move across the screen. There we go. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is add a transition to the animated box, the animated class. So dot animated, we'll just do transition property, which is going to be transform. Let's do a duration. Let's have it take 2 seconds so we can see these changes happen. And then we'll add in, we don't need a delay, that's fine. We'll do transition timing function. And we'll start with linear, which is one of the values that we get by default. And you can actually see those values here. So we have ease in, ease out, linear, step start, and step end are the predefined ones. But then we can also define our own function. If you are familiar with cubic, Bezier curves, never know how to pronounce that, you can define your own, and there's also a tool that I'll show you. But realistically, most of the time I'm just using ease in, ease out. Those are kind of the most common ones, and they're defaults for a reason. Okay, so if we go back, we just have it as linear. As I hover, you'll see it goes from point A to point B over here in a linear speed. Takes 2 seconds, and it goes the exact same speed the entire time. But if I can change that to something like ease in, and if we look at the graph for that, let's go to this page. This is another tool. I'll go to ease in. This is called Caesar, CSS easing animation tool. It's in the resources page. This is what the graph or the curve for ease in looks like. So as it eases in, it goes slower, and then it picks up speed towards the end. So let's try it out. We have ease in defined. It goes slow, and then it speeds up towards the end. Hopefully you can see that change happening. It takes a little bit, and then it gets going. So we can do the same thing, but change it to ease out, which works the opposite way. So it goes quickly and then slows down. Sort of like, I don't know, if you know baseball, you're running towards a base, you go quickly, and then you start to slow down as you get there. Maybe that's a terrible analogy. Sometimes people speed up and slide, but whatever. The point is that in this case, the acceleration is greater at the beginning. The speed is greater at the beginning, and then it slows down as it gets closer. So it makes a big difference if we get rid of that line rather than just going at a constant speed. So you can play around with some of the other ones. Let's do ease in dash out. And if you take a look at what that one looks like, kind of eases in, goes slowly at the beginning, and then speeds up, and then goes slower at the end as well. So let's take a look. Quicker, slow down. So one more time. It goes slow, and then quick, and then slow. Hopefully you can see that. It might be a bit hard over the video. Hopefully the frame rate, the screencasting software captures that well. The last thing that I'll say is that you can capture your own. So you can do things like define your own equation. Let's say that you like this ease out back. So it goes past and then comes back. You can click on it on this website, and it actually will give you the cubic Bezier curve that you want. So you can copy that over, and I can just replace this ease in out with that curve. So now as I do this, let's see what happens. There you go. You can see that I hover, it goes a bit too far and then comes back. So this definitely isn't a math course, but if you are curious and you want to define some of your own timing functions, this tool is really fun and useful. What you can do is find something that you like. Let's say you like this, and then you can tweak it. So totally change it to something like, how about this? Let's have it go really, really quickly at the beginning and then slow down towards the end. There we go. So we could do this, and if you wanted to actually grab the code to do that down here, you can copy this. Transition timing function, copy that and bring it over. And paste that in. Hopefully you can see that. So it's going very quick and then slowing down. So it's like an exaggerated version of ease out. Okay, so the last thing that you should know, just like with these other properties, transition delay, transition duration, and property, you can have multiple timing functions assigned. And the order matters, of course, just like the other three. So if we added in transition timing function, whatever came first, let's say ease in, would correspond to these values, and whatever came second would correspond to these values. And you are not limited to 2. However many values you have, you just need commas to separate them. But I'll stick to this for now. Hopefully you get the idea. And that wraps up the key 4 properties that have to do with transitions. So we had transition property, transition duration, transition timing function, and transition delay. So in the following video, you'll actually see a way of combining all 4 properties into a single line, a single shorthand property that can make your life a lot easier and makes my life a lot easier, a lot less typing. So I'll see you there.